Nobody saw this massive storm coming, and that is exactly why we need to talk about it right now. Because what is developing over the next several days could catch a huge number of people completely off guard. This system was not on anyone's radar as recently as 48 hours ago, and now suddenly the models are locking in on something that has the potential to be one of the more impactful weather stories of the entire summer. So let's get right into it, because there is a lot to cover, and I do not want to waste any time. Over the past 2 days, we have watched a weak disturbance drifting through the central plains that frankly nobody was paying much attention to. It looked disorganized, it looked shallow, and most of the guidance was treating it as just another passing system that would fizzle out with maybe some scattered showers and move on without much fanfare. But that has changed dramatically in just the last few model cycles, and now we are looking at the potential for a rapidly intensifying storm system that could bring a mix of severe thunderstorms, damaging winds, torrential rainfall, and even the risk of flash flooding to a huge swath of the country. This is the kind of scenario that keeps meteorologists up at night, because these sneaky systems that come out of nowhere are often the ones that end up causing the most damage, simply because people are not prepared for them the way they would be for a storm that had been advertised for a week. So what changed? Essentially, the upper level pattern is amplifying much faster than earlier guidance expected. We have a deep trough digging in from the north, and it is interacting with a much more moisture-rich air mass than anticipated, sitting across the Mississippi Valley and pushing into the Ohio Valley. When you combine a strengthening jet stream with all of that available moisture and instability, you get the ingredients for explosive thunderstorm development, and that is exactly what the newest runs of the high-resolution models are showing. Some of these simulations are honestly a little jaw-dropping, with widespread damaging wind gusts over 70 miles per hour embedded in a squall line that could stretch for hundreds of miles by the time it matures. Let's talk about the timeline, because this is going to move fast. During the day today, we are watching a broken line of thunderstorms fire up along a surface boundary draped from the central plains into the mid-Mississippi Valley. Early on, these storms will be more scattered and somewhat disorganized, but as daytime heating ramps up and the low-level jet strengthens later this afternoon, we should see rapid consolidation into a more organized cluster. By this evening, I would not be surprised if we see a bowing segment develop somewhere between Kansas City and St. Louis, and that is where the first round of significant damaging winds is likely. If you are in that corridor, this evening is when you want to have a way to get warnings, because these kinds of bowing lines can produce wind gusts that come out of nowhere and cause significant tree damage and power outages. Overnight tonight, this line is expected to continue pushing east, and this is actually one of the more concerning aspects of this setup, because overnight, severe weather tends to catch people off guard simply because they are asleep and not actively monitoring the radar. The instability profile does weaken somewhat after dark, which usually helps storms lose some of their punch, but with such a strong low-level jet in place, the wind threat may actually persist through the overnight hours, even as other aspects of severe weather diminish. So if you live anywhere from around Springfield back through central Illinois and into western Indiana, please make sure you have a way to receive warnings while you sleep, because this could be a nocturnal wind event that does real damage before the sun even comes up. As we move into tomorrow, the story shifts to the east and honestly gets more serious. The remnant energy from tonight's activity will interact with a fresh batch of daytime heating and a very unstable air mass defecting in from the Gulf, and this combination could set the stage for a more classically dangerous severe weather day. We are talking about the potential for large hail, damaging winds, and yes, the possibility of a few tornadoes, especially if we can get some discrete storm development ahead of the main line before everything grows upscale into a solid squall line. The area I am watching most closely for tomorrow stretches from around Louisville through Cincinnati, up toward Columbus, and even into parts of West Virginia. This is a densely populated corridor, and if this storm complex holds together the way some of the guidance suggests, we could be looking at wind damage reports scattered across a huge number of counties by the time it is all said and done. One thing that makes this system particularly sneaky is the timing relative to typical forecast lead time. Usually with a big severe weather outbreak, we start talking about it 5, 6, even 7 days out, and there's a slow buildup of confidence as the models converge. This one basically snuck up on the guidance, and that is a big reason why I titled this video the way that I did, because genuinely, almost nobody was talking about this system until the last day or so. That is exactly the kind of setup that leads to a higher than normal number of injuries and property damage, simply because people have not had the runway to prepare the way they normally would. So please, if you are anywhere in the zone I just described, do not brush this off just because you have not heard about it until now. Let's also talk about rainfall, because wind and hail are not the only concerns here. This system is tapping into a remarkably moist air mass, and some of the precipitable water values that we are seeing in the models are running well above what is typical for this time of year in this region. That means we could see training thunderstorms, where cell after cell moves over the same corridor, dumping tremendous amounts of rain in a short window of time. Some of the more aggressive model output is hinting at localized totals of 4 to 6 inches in spots, and when you get that kind of rain falling in just a few hours, flash flooding becomes a very real concern, especially in urban areas with poor drainage or in low-lying areas near creeks and small rivers. If you live in a flood-prone area anywhere along this storm's path over the next couple of days, please have a plan for what you will do if water starts to rise quickly, and never attempt to drive through flooded roadways, because it takes surprisingly little water to sweep a vehicle away. Now, as we push into the following day, the severe weather threat should begin to shift further east and slightly south, with the corridor of greatest concern moving into parts of Virginia, West Virginia, and even down into parts of the Carolinas. By this point, the Egmont system will likely be starting to lose a bit of its punch as it moves away from the most unstable air. But I still expect a corridor of damaging wind gusts and the potential for isolated severe hail as the line pushes through. This is also when we may start to see some interaction with higher terrain across the Appalachians, and that can sometimes lead to unpredictable behavior, with storms occasionally reinvigorating as they interact, with upslope flow, or conversely weakening more quickly than expected as they cross the mountains. It is one of the trickier forecast challenges with any system moving through this region, so I will be watching closely and will keep everyone updated if anything changes. Also, want to touch on something that a lot of people are not thinking about yet, which is the potential for this system, or a piece of the energy left behind by it, to interact with a secondary area of low pressure that could try to form near the coast a few days from now. Some of the ensemble members are hinting at just enough support for a coastal low to spin up, and if that happens, we could be looking at an entirely separate round of heavy rain and gusty winds impacting the mid-Atlantic and even into the Northeast toward the end of the week. This is admittedly lower confidence right now, and I do not want to overstate it, but given how quickly this whole system came together in the first place, I think it is worth mentioning so that nobody is caught off guard a second time in the same week. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about why this particular pattern is developing the way that it is, because I think understanding the bigger picture helps explain why the models struggled to pick up on this until so late. We have been in a fairly stagnant pattern for the last week or so, with a ridge of high pressure parked over the eastern half of the country and relatively quiet weather as a result. That kind of pattern can actually make it harder for models to anticipate rapid changes, because small-scale disturbances can get lost in the noise when the larger-scale flow is not doing much. But underneath that ridge, moisture has been slowly building, almost like pressure building behind a dam, and now that the upper-level pattern is finally breaking down and allowing troughiness to dig in from the north, all of that pent-up instability is being unleashed at once. This is part of why the storm system intensified so much faster than expected, and it is a good reminder that even in a quiet stretch of weather, conditions can be setting the stage for something much more active just around the corner. I do want to spend a moment talking about safety, because with a system like this developing so quickly, I know a lot of people simply have not had the storm on their radar the way they normally would with more lid time. If you are in any of the areas I mentioned over the next few days, please take a moment right now to think through your plan. Know where you would go if a tornado warning were issued for your area, ideally a small interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building, away from windows. If you are under a severe thunderstorm warning, treat it seriously, because winds over 70 miles per hour can down trees and power lines just as easily as a weak tornado can. And if you see water starting to rise on a roadway, do not attempt to cross it, no matter how familiar the road may seem to you. Turn around, find another way, and wait it out. As for timing specifics, one more time so everyone has a clear picture, today is about the plains and mid-Mississippi Valley, especially later this high afternoon into tonight. Tomorrow shifts the primary threat into the Ohio Valley, including cities like Louisville, Cincinnati, and Columbus, with the potential for the more classically dangerous setup of discrete storms transitioning into a squall line. The day after that pushes the threat into the Central Appalachians and parts of the Mid-Atlantic, including Virginia, West Virginia, and the Carolinas, with a continued risk of damaging winds and some hail, along with the ongoing flash flooding concern from all the rainfall that will have already fallen upstream. And then we have to keep an eye on the potential coastal low that could bring yet another round of impacts toward the end of the week for the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. I know this is a lot of information, and I know it is coming together faster than usual, but that is exactly the point of this video. Nobody saw this coming even just a couple of days ago, and now we are looking at a multi-day severe weather and flooding threat that could impact tens of millions of people across a huge stretch of the country. The lesson here, as always, is that the atmosphere does not care about our forecast lead time. And sometimes these systems develop so quickly that the only real defense is staying plugged in and paying attention to updates as they come, rather than relying on a forecast from several days ago that may already be outdated. I will continue to track this system closely over the next several days, and if things escalate the way some of the more aggressive model guidance is suggesting, there is a good chance we will go live to cover it in real time, especially if we start seeing tornado warnings or significant wind damage reports coming in. So make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, because I do not want anyone to miss an update if the situation continues to intensify the way it appears it might. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please share this with anyone you know who lives in the areas we talked about today, because the more people who are aware of this before it arrives, the fewer people will be caught off guard by a storm that, again, almost nobody was talking about until just recently. Stay safe out there, keep an eye on the sky, and we will see you in the next update.